Thank you for all being here tonight.
Is working?
We have a lot going on as we are deciding whether or not we want to take our medical cannabis facilities recreational, which is a really good question, because is it going to be more taxes if you're recreational? Is it going to be, are the feds more likely to come after a recreational facility than they are a medical facility? I mean, there's a lot of things that we've discussed. And as this industry has moved along, it literally moves in dog years. Wouldn't you agree? 7 years to one with the things that happen in it. So as we're here together, we need to focus on how we can get the industry to work together as a whole for the greater good of this entire process, because this is not an easy process, and we do have people who, legitimately, like Smarter Colorado, people who really don't agree with it, and they put up good arguments. So, there's a lot of things that the voters and even, the committees and the legislative staff that are really torn on, what is best for society. At one point, they think the voters voted for a tax because they wanted to see these schools different, and they wanted to see a change. So can we make that change happen without overtaxing the industry? And I know now we're talking about changing the medical marijuana tax, to meet recreational. So would that be better for somebody to actually go recreational or not? So those are the questions that we have. We want to thank our sponsors today, BioTrack THC. Amazing tracking software. If you're in the business, you should definitely check them out at biotrackthc.com. We have the Cash Hide Foundation. We have Cannabis Business Association, Clover Leaf University, and Clover Leaf Consulting. And of course, we would like to thank Casselman's for hosting our event tonight. So we have an amazing panel here tonight, and I didn't ever have them in order, and I need to plan this better, I think. But I am going to just introduce you, and then I'm gonna let you guys tell a little bit about yourselves, so that way I don't read your entire bios. So we have Sean Hauser, an attorney for Vicente Cederberg here in Denver.
Hi, I'm Sean. I work for Vicente Cederberg, and I'm
Let's pull it down a little bit.
short, so I'm also working with Sensible Colorado, working on the local implementation of Amendment 64, which is
Yes. There we go. We don't want it in your face either. There we go.
We need to hear Sean. She's wonderful.
so yeah, thank you.
Is that better? Can you hear her? Okay. Then we have TJ. I don't know how to pronounce your last name.
It's Lauritsen.
Lauritsen. And he is representing the union, which is amazing, because we actually have the UFCW here, who are trying to create legitimate unions for the industry and jobs, and that's just a big benefit to us as far as putting workers on the floor and lobbying and really pushing the movement forward. So we really want to thank him for being here today. We also have Robert Corry. Rob. He's pretty much alone has taken more marijuana back from the state than every attorney put together in this state. So Rob just does what he wants. If he decides he wants to speak, if he doesn't, he shows up. He pretty much runs the show, so we're really glad he showed up tonight, though.
Thank you. I've mellowed out a little bit lately, though.
Yeah, right. We also have Samantha Walsh. Samantha Walsh is a lobbyist here for a lot of you business owners who are out there who are looking for representation, and in your small communities, you don't know exactly how to get, your city council members, people to listen to you. There are some lobbyists here. So those are the type of people that you're going to want to talk to about representing your personal interests and helping you out fight those battles in your own hometowns. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, Chloe.
Then we have Craig Small. Are you doing the task force again?
No, not this round.
Okay, so he was on the previous task force, so he's lucky he gets a rest. But he's an attorney here in Colorado, and he is also on the board of NORML. We have Teri Robnett. She is a lobbyist as well. So if you're looking for representation, she's another person that you can talk to. She also will be sitting on the task force here during this next set of rules with the Department of Revenue and this implementation of regulated marijuana, and she also owns Cannabis Patients Network. Action Network. So if you're a patient and you're kind of wondering what's going to happen to patients, she's a great person to talk to for that as well. Thank you.
Thanks.
And then, is there somebody next to you? Oh, Sean? Okay, good. I'm getting that,
He doesn't
kind
wanna
of that
sit
view
next to
that.
me.
Sean Coleman. Sean Coleman is from Washington, D.C. He's worked with Jared Polis, actually, on his staff. He is a master of cannabis policy, and he is also a lobbyist here representing businesses and very involved in, various aspects of the business. His bio is amazing. He also went to Juilliard, which was like my dream. So that's always awesome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And then we have the infamous twirling hippie, Jessica LaRoe. Yeah. It's so funny that I think she said something to me when I asked her about that people didn't realize what she was in her previous life. And it was funny because when I met her at the Capitol, which is where I met her, she was throwing numbers out at me so fast. She's probably the one person who just really shut me up. And she has a stockbroker background, super smart, and one of the, I would say, main cannabis advocates that sits out on the task force. And I know she's going to sit on the task force this session as well to help us write the rules. So thanks for being here tonight. Hi, Bill. This is Wayward Bill. All right, so let's get started. We're going to discuss some issues that we have going on today. Working groups. So we're going to have 5 total working groups. Is that correct?
Yes.
Does somebody want to explain working groups, or would they like me to?
Which one are you looking at? We should probably have someone who sits on the working group.
Sitting on the group.
Like Jessica.
Well, we've had 2 meetings so far, and yesterday's meeting.
Working group.
Well, what you want me to explain what they are? Okay, so the work.
No, basically, explain to them how the process is going to work first, and then we'll get into like the logistics of it. Like, there's 5 work groups, correct?
Yeah, there are 5 working groups. Each one is headed by a different member of the MED, so they're just the medical has been dropped from the name. And each working group is sort of tackling different portions of 1317 and 258, the bills that were written to legislate the constitutional amendment. So the first working group was really dealing with transportation and
Licenses.
eligibility for transferring your license and how exactly you would do the transfer. So that's going to be a lot of what we can talk about today. And then the working group, what?
Badges.
Badges, exactly. So occupational eligibility, ownership eligibility, what you will have to prove from your existing business to transfer, and what different hoops you'll have to jump through. I will say that yesterday's meeting was an exercise in not being quite prepared. Today's working group meeting, it seemed like everyone was really prepared, so we didn't get quite as much done because we knew what we were talking about.
A lot more banter today.
I don't know that we accomplished anything more than the other one, but the other,
But of
it
course
seems like more members were
Today's group was
engaged.
Jessica's group,
Well,
so
at least
you
we
can
have you on
imagine
there.
the banter.
Well, at least I brought topics up that they could think about, you know, so somebody's thought about it. I pre-digested it and spit it back up for them.
Right? So basically, we have the Medical Marijuana Enforcement Division is now becoming the Marijuana Enforcement Division located within the Colorado State Department of Revenue. They will be regulating both medical marijuana and recreational marijuana, correct? And then there's going to be 5 working groups who are going to go on these different policies, labeling, tracking, things like that. So let's just jump into it. Let's start talking about taxes. Who wants to start? Sam?
Well, I can jump into this.
Okay.
We passed the Alcohol Marijuana Equalization Initiative, Amendment 64. That's the official name of it. I helped draft it. A lot of good people also drafted it and worked for it. That initiative was supposed to equalize marijuana and alcohol. What are the alcohol taxes currently in Colorado? You can look this up on the Department of Revenue website. The current alcohol tax at the state level is 8 cents on a gallon of beer. 8, and that's 3.2 beer. They also have an 8 cents per gallon of regular beer tax. 7 cents per liter of wine, and 62 cents per liter of hard alcohol. So those are the taxes that the alcohol industry deals with on an excise level. What is 8 cents of a gallon of beer? What percentage is that? A gallon of beer is approximately, give or take, a 12-pack. There's 128 ounces in a gallon. There's 12 ounces per beer. So it's actually about 11 beers, so a 12-pack. What does a 12-pack cost in Colorado? Anywhere from $14 to $18, depending on quality, right? So what is the percentage of 8 cents of $15 is 0.5% of the cost of that product, alcohol, 0.5%. What is the proposal for marijuana taxes? 15% excise tax statewide. And by the way, they're going to try to collect this excise tax from your internally vertically integrated businesses. So when you transfer from your wholesale warehouse to your retail, you have to pay a 15% excise tax from your own product. Good luck on that. In addition to the 15%, then they're going to charge, this is a proposal, you can still vote no, and I'll get to how you should vote on these in a second. Secondly, 10% sales tax statewide. So now we're up to effectively a 25% tax rate. The latest proposal in Denver is to begin with a 5% sales tax just for marijuana and ratchet that up to 10% in time. So we're up to 30%, possibly 35% in Denver. Add to that the normal sales tax, which we all pay already, which everything is taxed at that, and that's 2.9% statewide, so basically 3%. Plus in Denver, your sales tax is 7.62%. So you're up to 35 plus another 7%. So it is a 42% tax rate if the government gets its way. If the government gets its way,
42%.
42%, give or take, depending on which locality you're in and all that. Can we deal with that? Is that something our industry can take? I don't think so.
We've talked about maybe placing it, I mean, as I've sat, the meetings I've sat in, maybe placing it on the consumer, and the consumer doesn't have that amount of money. We know that that will create a black market. So, I mean, what are we proposing? What do we say to somebody who's doing this?
It's axiomatic. The consumer will pay all this, or they won't pay all this because the black market, which is untaxed and unregulated, in addition to the gray market, which is legal, but untaxed and unregulated, and there's a very active gray market in recreational marijuana right now. It's out there. So, you know, this tax is potentially destructive to our industry. We want a regulated industry to survive, and I did vote for 64, which did have in it a 15% excise tax. So that was in there, and we voted for that. I thought it was a little high, and it was a ceiling, not a floor. The legislature grabbed that and more. So, you know, I'm advocating people to vote no on these taxes, and I'm advocating our industry unite and advocate for a no vote. Reasonable taxes we can deal with.
So-
unreasonable taxes we
Okay.
can't.
So, Rob?
Rob is correct on a few points.
that's a good
But he's
opinion.
wrong on advocating a no vote, and here's why. And Sean will be able to help me out on this. It's one thing to have an overly regulated industry. It's one to have one that's not properly funded. And it's not like we're operating in a strictly legal market where there's competition, where there's history of regulation. You know, this is a brand new frontier, and obviously that's going to take some sort of very strict enforcement, safe oversight, and you can't do that without the funding in place, and 15% excise tax isn't going to institute the proper funding. I think Sean can help take it from here.
So I think that when you are talking to your elected officials, particularly your local elected officials, the first thing you need to understand is that if the state tax passes, they get 15% of the state tax into their sales tax into their coffers. They can do with it whatever they want. But the other thing is, and I think this is something you need to think about when you talk to any lawmaker, is there is this idea, and many lawmakers had, that marijuana is this brand new thing. Marijuana wasn't invented on December 12th. Neither was the marketplace for it. Because let me demonstrate to you the marketplace for people who are not medical marijuana patients in the state of Colorado that has been the marketplace for as long as anybody can remember. Allow me to demonstrate. Hey man, what's going on? Yeah, I was wondering if I could come by in a little bit. Oh sure, wait, honey? He said we should bring the kids because our kids want to hang out. This idea that this black market in Colorado is this dangerous dark alley thing is not correct. They are correct that people don't want to go to a dark alley. That's why that doesn't exist. Marijuana is sold in every neighborhood, in every city in this state, from people that we all know and are friends with. So this idea that the consumer behavior is going to magically change from, I'm going to call my friend whenever I feel like and go over to their house whenever I feel like, and our kids are going to play together and talk about their homework, to instead, I'm going to get in my car, drive across town or to a different town, and then be on camera, and then pay 15% inflated because of the excise tax, an additional 10% tax, plus all the other taxes. That is just simply not correct. And what you need to explain to elected officials, whether you're a consumer or a business owner, is that the regulated marijuana industry is not competing in a vacuum. It's competing against consumer behavior that is well established, and there is no incentive for the consumer to change the behavior if the tax rate is extraordinary, and there's no mandate in Amendment 64 for medical marijuana businesses to switch over to recreational. So if they tax this too much, what will happen is that business owners who are medical marijuana businesses will look at the business proposition and say, well, do I want to invest an additional 15% in my business in addition to my extraordinary taxation based on the IRS 280E, on the idea that maybe the consumer will change the behavior when I can't even advertise to them? Or do I want to continue with my current medical marijuana patient business and continue to have my business thrive and succeed? That will be what choice that businesses will make, and Amendment 64 will have had, in effect, no effect for the average Colorado marijuana consumer. These local taxes are an absolute threat to the will of the voters, and you must speak to every single one of your local elected officials and make sure that they understand that.
Well, I'd like
Which is why, yes.
to add to what Sean's saying. In addition to that, the excise tax really makes having product to sell recreationally by January 1st really, really difficult. If we don't have an excise tax, it's a lot easier to split plants from your grow and designate some of them, because technically you're stealing plants from a patient and then taxing them, which is pretty shady for the state to do. If we vote the excise tax down, it's a lot easier for the existing medical businesses to divert some of their product, because you're not trying to add an onerous tax that's inappropriate to plants that were designated for medical use the day before. And that's something that's going to have a really big impact on our ability to transfer not just plants, but inventory and other products that we may have in inventory to a dual licensing. And with all due respect to what Sean says, if that tax passes, I might not want to go for medical license, from medical to dual licensing. But the reality is 85% of my business clients are already talking about becoming dually licensed, which means I'm forced to whether I want to or not, taxes or not. So it just basically means that I'm one layer less profitable in reality. And that's a really bad thing for all of us. And I think that as an industry, we definitely need to stand together and reach out not just to our own community, but to conservatives and be like, there's no way you would pass this tax on anybody else. If you want to call yourself a conservative, you cannot in good conscience lobby for this tax against one segment of society. It's just not fair.
I have a question for Sean, because you guys have been bouncing around the state a little bit like I have, going to all these towns and counties and whatever and talking to these legislators. And a lot of them are putting in moratoriums into place until November, December, and they're waiting on the tax vote in November that we're going to have to make on the state level. If that fails, what do you think their response is going to be?
I think
They won't opt in.
Ban them.
I think the state legislature will propose a lower tax, a tax that makes sense.
And then
What
you
will
have
the
a whole
cities
year
do? What
with
will the
businesses sitting
localities
idly.
do?
No, tax-free, which is what we should be
Well,
anyway.
you still have to wait a year.
Tax like everyone
You have
else,
to wait a year
just
for that
like
to go through the
everyone else.
legislative process.
Well,
Well, I
Al
want to say
Capone was
that some of
tax-free,
these
right?
communities where we're talking to city councilmen and mayors, it just seems like they all got their hand out and they're saying, now we can either opt out and you guys can do without your recreational, or are we going to have us a tax here just so that the city can get some benefit out
And
of it
then they're going to
too?
be even more upset, and then they're going to start taxing medical, I mean,
That's-
it's
that's
like,
the big debate
and
right now.
then,
Still has to
you're
go
going to
to
have an even
Tabor.
more angry. No, listen, I understand. Like, you fight the local taxes. Local taxes are terrible. They're awful. It's onerous. The state tax, I'm sorry, but it has to pass because here's what it's going to do. It's going to trigger federal intervention, and that's not like a threat. That's just an inevitability. And if you don't think so, look at the audits that have been coming out lately, saying that this hasn't been enforced and it hasn't been enforced properly. That's going to be the biggest thing. And then, and Sean can attest to this too, Sean Coleman, that when there's a lapse in regulatory streamlining, or if there's doubt within the voter populace, whatever happens, it will trigger federal intervention. We've seen it happen in
So-
California. We've seen it happen in Montana.
So what Samantha is referring to, and as a matter of disclosure, Samantha and I are lobbying partners, so we've had lots of conversations about lots of things. So what I was explaining to legislators during the legislative session, particularly when there was a proposal to tie the tax ballot question to the implementation of the regulatory program, was that there is a clear history of when pro-marijuana ballot measures fail, or city councils or local governments take negative anti-marijuana actions, it is usually followed by pretty swift federal intervention. This is seen primarily in California, but it's also was seen in Washington State when the governor, the former governor, vetoed the medical marijuana implementation ordinance back in 2010. All of a sudden, all the dispensaries in Spokane got raided when the Montana legislature passed their first bill that rolled back provisions of the medical marijuana program up there. There was federal intervention, so that there is a pattern, but to kind of nuance that argument a little bit, what I'm referring to is when these are incidents when there's a negative voter or legislative idea on marijuana. I don't know, first of all, two things have changed. The first thing that's changed is that the White House, as well as Department of Justice, have been pretty clear when they're talking to members of Congress that their decision is going to be made on a political decision. Like, would it be politically wise to get involved in Colorado or Washington's actions? And you're talking about two states that are states that these folks are Democrats, and they need these states to win elections come 2014 and 2016. So they're not going to be in a real rush to upset the voters here. I question whether or not they would view and again, I'm not advocating for the state tax one way or the other by saying this. I don't know if they would view the voters rejecting the state tax as a voter rejection of the retail marijuana program. In fact, I think that one could conclude that it would actually be the opposite, because there was an opportunity to tag the regulations of retail marijuana to the tax. That was defeated by the General Assembly, and the regulatory program has a general fund appropriation for the next 5 years. So even if the tax proposal doesn't pass, the MED will still be getting a $5 million appropriation from the general fund every year regardless. The point of the sales tax was to backfill that general fund appropriation so that that $5 million isn't being taken from other state purposes. But I respectfully disagree with the interpretation of my theory.
Do you disagree with the interpretation that the legislature will be angry?
No, I think
If the tax
oh no,
doesn't
look,
pass?
I don't think there's a single
waiting to
legislative
say
body in the state
Do you
that is not going to be furious if the taxes don't pass, whether the state or local.
disagree?
They should be
Yeah.
angry with
But
themselves.
listen,
No,
but-
but do you also disagree with the interpretation that the Amendment 64 wasn't just carried by purely the industry and activists? There was a big chunk of Colorado that voted for this purely to see it taxed because they wanted to get some revenue. And that is a huge chunk of the Colorado voting population.
And they vote.
And do you not think that I'm just saying, and do you not think that if what the industry did promise, we promised them a 15% excise tax. I get it. It's not cool or fair that it's tied to a 10% sales tax. And
Right.
now that the governments are coming in, the local governments, after they've already been given a share back, that is not fair. But you don't think that...
It's not a 10% sales tax. Let's get that clear to begin with here.
Well, look,
These lobbyists are very interesting, aren't they?
I don't think it was wise of the General Assembly to tie the two taxes together in one ballot question because the voters did vote for and anticipated that there might be a 15% excise tax. The 10% sales tax was General Assembly's idea. I also don't think it's particularly wise for local governments to pile on because the reality is the more taxes you have on a ballot, the more likely anything will fail. And by the time voters get to any local taxes, forget about whether it's for marijuana or not, the voters are going to have been asked to open their wallet to the tune of $2 billion. The biggest tax on the ballot is the School Finance Act, which is a $1 billion tax increase on the state. And then it's followed, the next question on the ballot will be, by the way, you just spent $1 billion on schools. Would you like to spend another $70 billion on maybe school construction and marijuana regulation? And then on down you go to the ballot. By the time you get down to the city of Boulder or city of Denver, the voters already spent $2 billion. Do they want to spend another $5 or $6 million? I don't know. So, what I would recommend to the people in the audience is that you talk to your local elected officials and you make it clear that you expect them to implement Amendment 64 regardless of the outcome. Because what I think needs to be understood by local elected officials is that they are trying the patience of the voters. This idea that people argument they make, well, we don't know what the voters voted for. Maybe they voted to ban for local governments to ban. That's not what people voted for. Let's be realistic. If you were opposed to retail marijuana stores as a possibility, you had a very easy way to safeguard your bet. You could have voted no. People voted yes.
Colorado Springs.
People voted yes with some anticipation that there would be retail marijuana stores, and the voters are frankly getting tired. So first, the number one message is no taxation without regulation. And the second message is that we don't care about your slush funds. We voted for regulation of marijuana like alcohol, and that is what we expect. And you can either vote for that on your city council, or we can vote for your opponent in the next election. And that has got to be the message. It's got to be clear.
And we can't be worried as an industry. Our job as an industry is not to please the state legislature. The state legislature doesn't support Amendment 64. That's why we had to do it with the voters. The state legislature never would have enacted this measure. The state legislature is not our friends. The state legislature needs to hear a message, a cogent, unified message from our industry. Stop trying to take 40% of this industry's money to use for your pet government projects. Last time I checked, these people are arrogant enough, they literally want a gold roof over their heads. That's what they want. Now, I'd love to have a gold roof on my house, and I'm sure a lot of us would love to have a gold roof on our houses. None of us have that. There isn't a single building in the state of Colorado that has a gold roof except for the state legislature. That's how arrogant these people are. So I don't care what they think about our industry. And as for the federal government, the lack or existence of a 40% tax doesn't either protect us from the federal government or doesn't bring the federal government in. The federal government has left our industry in Colorado alone for the duration of the industry other than two things. One thing, the 1,000 feet from a school deal, we all know about that. We dealt with it, we moved. They left us alone for the most part. And then Chris Barkowitz. Those are the two things where the federal government cared about our industry. Other than that, they've completely left us alone. And this entire time, we have been taxed identically to every other business. And that's what I'm asking. I'm not asking for marijuana to be tax-free, but I'm not asking for it to be 40% taxed. It should be taxed like everything else, which is where it's been right now. It has been taxed like everything else. So we work hard in this industry, and it is not, the perception of the people out there is, 20-year-olds are printing millions of dollars a month. That's not the way it is. And in fact, the government is partially to blame for that because of the regulations they've lumped on us. That wrecks our profitability more times than not. So this is not a huge cash cow. We need to educate the government about that. But the first step is to reject these taxes, vote no, and if the legislature gets a no vote, they'll go back to the drawing board and they'll probably propose a more reasonable tax that we can live with. Maybe something like what alcohol is, the Alcohol Marijuana Equalization Initiative. That's what we designed. That's what we voted.
Some of us have been patiently waiting to rebut Sean's statement for about 15 fucking minutes here, so just calm down. Yes. All right, so my point would like to be that honestly, I think everyone should vote no on the state level taxes and vote yes for your local taxes and give your local government an incentive to work with you. Honestly, I'm in the opposite camp from Sean. I think the state tax is a fucking bunch of crap. The state got $300 million just from the 3% tax that they got from the entire state revenue from cannabis sales last year from medical only. We don't need to give these people more than $300 million that we've already given them. And beyond that, your local governments are the ones where you're having the state has already said it's okay. Your bigger issue is with your local government. You need a better friend there. And most of these local governments aren't talking 25%, they're talking 5, 6, 7, 10% on top of the 25%. Vote no on the 25%, vote yes on the 5 or 6% in your own community, because that's your school, that's your kid, that's your neighbor.
Well, first, I do want to say, and I think I did say it, but if I wasn't clear, I'll clarify now. Although that I was saying for your information purposes, I wasn't advocating one way or the other for the state tax. I think I said that, but if I didn't, that's what I meant. I'm not advocating one way or the other on the state tax. And to clarify, until Tuesday night, thanks to the help of some people in this room, Boulder was actually considering a 25% tax. Boulder, city of Boulder.
25%.
25%.
Can I ask everybody in here, how many people in our audience are cannabis business owners? And how many of you are in Denver? Okay, how many of you are in suburbs, other local municipalities besides Denver? Okay, so, I mean, this is huge. How many of you have lobbyists? Are you scared to raise your hand?
They're all up here.
So I think that right now, I mean, this is new for us as an industry. We don't know that we have to do all, I mean, this is, it's already a lot, you know, to pay. Tell us about.
I just want to reiterate how important it is to talk to your local officials. They want to hear about it. They want to hear from business owners. They're trying to figure out if they should tax at the local level and where it should go and what it should be. And it's important that you talk to them, and particularly right now while they're looking at it.
And I'll be honest with you, like, this coming out thing has been a little difficult for those of us who have been in the industry for a long time. Like, you know, even with me, it's like, you know, used to be take each situation by, you know, like how, you know, it's situation specific. And now it's like, it's turning into a rush, and it's very fast. And it's, a lot of people want to talk about it. They expect you to call them and talk to them about things right away. And it's still a little bit hard. I mean, we are emerging out of prohibition, you know, and a lot of these business owners have a lot to lose.
Yeah.
So we didn't even know we were supposed to call our local state officials last year and even say we were there. You know, we were supposed to.
If you're afraid to come out of the closet, you're going to lose your investment. I mean, why would you make an investment if you're afraid to admit you've made it?
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, now we're learning it's okay, but it's still scary.
It's always been okay. If you
And-
weren't
and a lot
proud
of
of being
these
in
city
this, you should have
governments-
stayed in the closet and gotten a straight job.
But I think kind of to,
And a lot of these city governments are throwing these taxes at the most ridiculous things. If you went to the Denver City Council meeting, they're talking about putting on 6 vans to go around and pick up people who are too stoned to drive. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. We're going to be on the
It's
couch.
because they want
at
money for
home
other-
at bar closing time.
and you know, I just want to throw in really quickly, kind of to Sean House's point and to Chloe's point as well. There's 2 things. There's one, there's talking to your local elected officials, which you must do. If you don't know you're a city council member, change that tomorrow.
Or county commissioner.
If you don't know your county commissioner, change that tomorrow. If you don't know your state representative, your state senator, change that tomorrow. But then the second aspect of it, which is kind of Chloe's point, which is you also have to know how to talk to these people, because they don't speak your language. They don't speak the language of you're running a small business. They don't speak the language of you're a responsible marijuana consumer. They speak the language of, they hear from the law enforcement lobby, they hear from the prison lobby, they hear from, you know, as we started to call them at the Capitol, the smart moms, the people who are the perpetual prohibitionists. That's who they hear from. And those people know how to speak their language. So you need to know how to speak the language of the legislature, because otherwise it doesn't matter how right you are. If they don't understand you, it does not matter. So how do you speak to these people? Number one, as on an individual perspective, I'm a voter. I voted very clearly because I want there to be regulated retail marijuana stores. Don't believe that me, the voter, voted for your ability to ban it or your ability to tax it. That is not what I voted for. I voted for because I want to go into a store and buy marijuana that's safe and legal and tested. That's what I voted for.
So,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Secondly, I did not vote for you to have an infinite slush fund. So if you need to have a reason for your taxes. Don't just say, well, because I don't understand, me, legit, I don't understand what's going to happen. They what they're saying is like, we need these taxes because we don't understand what's going to happen.
You mean you're not in favor of the Christian Thurstone permanent employment package?
I'm certainly not. And certainly you did not vote for Amendment 64, so people like Dr. Thurstone could have a line item slush fund in the Denver City budget.
But he needs that vote.
Oh, I want to vote too.
How many people here think the industry could survive that?
One final point.
I am a rowboat.
One final point to all that, which is that I expect you, my elected official, to move deliberately to support what I voted for. So that doesn't mean moratorium. That doesn't mean ban. That doesn't mean, oh, we're going to implement, but we're going to do it in July of next year or October or 2015. What I meant is the state constitution says I can expect to walk into a store and buy marijuana on January 1, 2014. And that's what I intend to do, and you're going to make it happen because you work for me.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I also want to say something about your local officials and your local situation. You might, if you're in a community where you really feel like your community is on the cusp, you might want to preemptively start gathering signatures for a special election, even though they haven't banned it already, and get out ahead of that. Because the reality is, there's going to be a lot of places that change their mind about what they want to do in November, and then you're screwed. You got to wait a whole long time for another election unless you're ready to go right then and ready to hit the ground running right then. And you don't want to wait that whole year. It's unfair to you, and you're going to face unfair competition during that time.
And if you've saved up that money and you find out that you don't need it for those purposes, then contribute that money to the campaign of your 420 friendly legislator. Because, I mean, it was one of the state reps, Jonathan Singer, came and testified at the Boulder City Council meeting the other night. He sat there with all the rest of us until after 11 o'clock waiting to testify. And he was there, and that makes a big impression. So when it comes time for him to be up for re-election, you can bet there's a group of us that are going to be donating to his campaign.
Right. So we have city council members coming to testify at I mean, this is really this is where we're at. This is amazing.
And I want to say something about what Teri said to elections, that one thing that I think is really not on the radar right now and needs to be is who's running in the AG election in the coming year, because it's going to have a huge impact on us. Whoever gets that job is going to be who decides how everything that impacts all of us is run. And right now, we don't have a single candidate that's even remotely friendly to us.
Yeah, they're all the candidates for
horrible.
AG are bad for drug policy and marijuana policy overall. It's kind of the lesser of the evils.
So, and also really want to go back to
They're all evil. There's no lesser evil on that.
But it's something where we need to maybe start talking about identifying our own candidate.
I want to just quickly go back to a point. I just want to quickly go back to a point Jessica made that was really important before we lose that thread, which is what happens with your local governments. So there's a variety of routes. For one, local governments cannot refer a ballot measure to ban marijuana businesses except for on an even number of years. So the first time they would have to be able to do that would be 2014. However, if a city council or town board passes an ordinance, you can challenge that immediately. You have to collect signatures, and you have to look at your particular town or city's charter for how that process works, but you can have a citizen initiative to overturn an action of your town board or council, depending on. So it's important. These, not to suggest that everybody in the room hire a lobbyist right away, but that is kind of one of the reasons why that profession does exist, because that's our job to know how your particular town or city charter works. But in a lot of cases, you have the ability to, sometimes it's 30 days, sometimes it's 60 days, to petition against an action of your town board or city council. And if you get enough signatures, they generally either have to immediately reconsider it and change their mind, or then it goes to an election. And depending on where it is in the calendar, it would either be a special election if November is too far away, or it'd be a November election. But again, it depends on what that timeline is. In general, it's about 120 days. So for example, if your city council were to ban in January and you got petitions to overturn that ban of the city council, they would have to probably do a special election sometime in like June or something like that, because November would be too far away. So that's just something to keep in mind as well.
And it's also
And there are two localities or two towns in Colorado right now where there are groups that are looking at and should be filing initiatives to repeal their
get onto
city
the
council's moratoriums coming up, or bans coming up. So we are seeing that already.
And
Those
that would be
on the
Larimer?
2013.
You said, right, there's a proposed ban on edibles in Larimer?
In Larimer County.
And then there's additional local taxes proposed for Denver and Boulder?
Yeah, and a number of places actually are starting to look at local taxes. And what's important to remember too on the local government level is a lot of local officials are weighing heavily on whether or not the tax measure is going to pass
The state.
in making their decision on the state level, in making their decision on whether or not to ban or to place a moratorium. So support for the state tax is important in that manner. In the big picture, what is important is that localities move forward and they don't ban and they don't impose a moratorium.
Can I ask you guys a question, though? I've never heard of a ban on edibles. Like, I thought you either ban marijuana or you don't. I mean, when are we going to start telling people, listen, you can smoke it like this, you can do this?
They're actually,
There's different
and they're
states
actually, I
where
mean, here they
edibles
talk
are
about
illegal.
how smoking marijuana is so bad and cancer and comparing it with tobacco, and yet they're looking at banning edibles, so that's eliminating, and along with that, I would assume probably tinctures and everything
Yeah.
else. So essentially, you're going to be limited to smoking or vaping. So, I mean, it really doesn't make any sense, but I can tell you that it's all coming from the Save the Children perspective.
And as you're going
you
through
know.
legislation, you're going to find more and more and more people start piling on rumors, start piling on wishes, and in the end, wanting to negotiate a settlement that really is where they want. And we got to try to figure out what that is. And I think it's probably 5% on the states, and I think that's too much.
Well, and
I mean,
I've,
this
Or on the
idea,
city.
How many people think the taxes are too much? I mean, can we as an industry afford this tax? I don't think we can. I mean, I don't think we can. I mean, Rob,
It'll be the consumers that end up paying the tax.
I mean,
'cause
and is
it'll all
that
come
going
down
to create the
consumers.
black market?
well,
I
the
mean,
owners will pay too because we'll lose business.
Yeah.
I mean, even our small meager share will be cut down
because it's
somebody
a
will go
sin
somewhere else.
tax.
Now, I want to be really clear about what the state taxes actually are, because the state legislature, in my opinion, has been disingenuous and misleading in how it's been presented, and the media and everybody else has gone along with it. Our state legislature has now shown the rest of the state how to get around Tabor. And they've got a 15, what they're calling up to 15% excise tax, which they've indicated that they will probably start at 15%, but supposedly they can lower it if you've ever heard of them actually lowering a tax. And then the special sales tax is what we call, what was it, 10%, and trust me, because the actual language says that they can charge up to 15%. But on January 1st, that tax will be 10%. But after that, they can change it, they can raise it, they can lower it. So be aware that when you're voting for this, that you're potentially voting for 15% excise tax and a 15% special sales tax on marijuana. I just think you need to be, you need to know the truth.
this vote is also, let me say one thing, this vote is bigger than just taxes. That's an important issue, but you know, our industry, I mean, when we started this thing in 07, 08, we were kind of with our tail between our legs. We're not sure we're legitimate. We're, you know, federally questionable. We pretty much just took everything the government threw at us and made us do. But, you know, this is 2013. We have won a major election decisively, all right? We got more votes than Barack Obama in Colorado. We are more
Almost a
popular
million
than Barack
more.
Obama, and I'm tired of this industry getting beat up. We saved our state's economy, this industry did.
Yes,
we did. We hired people, we rented out space. You know, we have built these businesses and we've worked our butts off to do it. And if we defeat these tax proposals, that is a huge shot against the bow of the government. Stop messing with marijuana. Stop trying to cash in on marijuana. You know, we work hard. Treat us like every other industry. Don't treat us better. Don't treat us worse. Just treat us like everything else. Equalize us with alcohol. So if we win this thing, I mean, our industry, and the feds, as Sean says, an excellent point, the feds care what voters think. They really do. I mean, the only reason, one of the things, probably the main thing that keeps the feds away from us is public opinion. And they know that we're more popular than their commander-in-chief, Barack Obama. And not to mention that the U.S. Department of Justice has quite a few things on its hands right now. There's quite a few scandals that it's dealing with. They can't deal with the scandal of trying to undermine an industry in a state that employs probably 10,000 people. I mean, there are people who feed their families. You're here. You feed your families with this industry. So, you know, we defeat this tax thing. It not only does it save us 40%, but it is also a real strong symbolic victory that keeps the feds and the state away from us and keeps those governments from trying to mess with us anymore. There is no other industry in the world that would for a second tolerate a 40% tax on what we do. Name me the industry that is going to.
But Rob, we operate in a vacuum here. It's not like you can go to like Utah and 40%. Say, "Oh, you're going to tax us cheaper. I'm going to move my business to Utah."
Even the porn industry or the gambling industry wouldn't tolerate that. I mean,
the porn industry tolerates a lot, from what I see.
And I'm tired of being ashamed.
The only people I see wanting to support the taxes are
lobbyists. We shouldn't be ashamed to be in the marijuana industry. We should not be ashamed of it.
It's not being ashamed. It's operating in reality, Rob.
Accepting a 40% tax.
It's operating in reality. No, it's not a 40% tax. First of all, it's 25%.
That is bullshit.
Second of all, it's operating within reality, because here's the reality: what's going to happen? Licensing fees are going to go through the roof. Registry
So
guys are getting
I
the
want
crowd
to briefly interject. Again, to be clear, because Jessica Nixon keeps just reminding me that only the lobbyists are supporting the tax. I want to be very clear that everything I say is not intended to be construed as either support for or opposition to the tax, but for you to think about.
Okay, so real quick.
And if you look at the rest of the countries looking at the
All right,
responsibility
we're going to bring this
Colorado.
conversation
We
together.
don't pass the state tax.
Here's the thing that I want you to think about. Just as food for thought. Our legalization success in Colorado, and this one that we share with Washington, is part of a national movement.
Yes.
So everything that we do sets precedent for the rest of the country.
I'm not paying 40% taxes for the rest
listen
of
to
the
what I'm
country.
saying. So what you need to think about is whether you vote for or against a state tax or for or against a local tax, what message does that send to the states that would follow us? It's a matter of thinking about this from a perspective of you are setting precedent no matter what you do.
Set the precedent not to be pussies and stand up for your rights and don't get railroaded for your fucking money.
So, with that
Violent
said,
hippie over there.
I would like to let everybody know
Is that
that
with me, Rob?
we have, okay, so we're going to stop talking about taxes. It sucks. We're going to talk about transferring our licenses. But with that said, I want to ask one question just to you, TJ. Does the union support the taxes?
The state tax, yes, we do, and let me kind of explain that. And we have campaigns going
Just TJ.
throughout the country. And throughout the country, we want to see what's happening in Colorado go other places. And we think it made it much easier in Colorado to put that excise tax on the ballot of 64 to get people who were not marijuana users to come to our side.
And I'm not sure if you guys understand what the union could do for an industry like this, but they can put hundreds of workers on the floor. And I'm sorry, but just like 1 million votes, that could be very strong for our industry. So the fact that everybody's stepping up to this is huge for us as well, but we are, the first business owners, are we the one that has to pay for all of this and set it forward? So what we have done is we've launched the Cannabis Business Association, one professional business association that you can be part of or not, that will actually hire we have every lobbyist on this panel we're hiring, and we're going to basically start a tax campaign, and we're going to provide free approved vendor programs monthly for our members. We're going to actually, and my approved vendor programs are certified by the Department of Education. So we want to, and we're going to work with every industry group. We're not going to be for any problems, any craziness. We're going to just look for solutions and really try to bring a solution to this taxes. And I think we all need to pull together because there's a lot of differences, but I mean, it's hard for a bunch of business owners sitting here too. We need a solution, and I think that that's going to be the best way. So with that said, shall we talk about transferring the licenses? When can we actually expect retail stores to open?
January 1st, 2014.
And that you think they're going to be selling
I see a lot of
and
problems
open?
with having product on the shelf on that day.
It really depends on the locality too. Every local government's kind of moving at its own pace. Hopefully the bigger ones will move on time, but there's a significant number that are going with short moratoriums, kind of like March 2014, July 2014. So I think you'll kind of see them roll out differently. The hope is that Denver will move forward on time and kind of set the precedent for the rest of the state. So kind of pressuring your local officials here to move forward on time is really important.
Yeah, January 1st is going to be a beautiful day in Colorado. You're going to see thousands of times in our state people walking into a retail store and buying marijuana, and they will only have to show a state-issued driver's license. They won't have to show a registry card. They won't have to have that registry card photocopied. They won't have to be on any sort of database whatsoever other than the DMV database. And these people can be from anywhere in the world. You're not just restricted to Colorado residents. January 1st is
Freedom, finally, freedom.
yeah, it's going to be a good day. I mean, whether you pay 40% more for your marijuana remains to be seen, but there will be a big rush, I believe, with or without the taxes. It'll be a much bigger rush without the taxes, but without or with the taxes, you're going to see a huge rush on retail marijuana stores. The novelty factor is going to be huge. I mean, my mother, who would never buy marijuana in a parking lot transaction, would consider walking into one of these open stores and purchasing it in a reasonable credit card transaction and safely walking outside to her car and maybe not a credit card transaction, but a legitimate legal transaction that's legal under our laws of our state.
I just want to ask you a question, Rob.
People are going to be coming from all over the world to do that.
I want to ask you a quick question,
Make it
Rob.
by it.
Ask.
Based on actually reading the rules that the DOR put out, how are you reconciling the date of January 1st with the 90-day licensing process and the fact that it says a retail recreational center can only sell marijuana that was transferred to it from a fully, completely licensed retail recreational cultivation? If that retail recreational cultivation is licensed within a 90-day period, how do they have a finished plant to cultivate, harvest, and have dried on January 1st?
Well, I didn't write these regulations, but I did help to write 64, and it says that you can apply for a license on October 1st of this year, and it requires them to grant that license within 90 days of the application, so October 1st, January 1st. That's how I calculate that date.
And remember, the medical plants magically become recreational plants.
Because there was a so Jessica, your subtext is, I think, well taken, and the answer is the state is going to allow the retail business to steal a patient's plants. It's going to happen. There's nobody to stop it. It's going to happen. That's all there is
Nobody's
to it.
going to
But they
complain.
can't steal finished inventory.
That said, and also, I think there's, I don't want to go too far into that, but if the local governments allow businesses to be open to January 1, I think is a more important question. So that is what, again, need to be talking to your local elected officials and say, look, a moratorium until July, October, whenever, is not acceptable.
It's ridiculous.
Because to be up to, I really hope that I'm wrong about this, but from all the evidence that I'm seeing working with local governments, I think March is optimistic at this point. Because every single local government is looking for a reason to delay.
The reality is it's all going to start like a Russian bread market where the shelves are going to be empty very quickly. And the idea of medical marijuana retail...
Craig, will you speak into the mic just a little bit more so I can hear you?
What was it? Oh, sorry.
There you go.
So the idea of medical marijuana retail and recreational retail is that both are going to be able to operate in the same geographical location. Unfortunately, that means that only adults 21 years and older can buy in these areas. So you're going to have the same product sold to medical marijuana patients and recreational payments. It's going to start off very, very slow on January 1st, 2014, until we can kind of get through these local moratoriums, through the licensing process. The MMED, their licensing process, they still haven't licensed people who submitted applications 3 years ago. So I don't think we're going to be seeing those licenses completed very quickly.
They're required to.
But we corrected
you
that
have-
in
I
64.
mean-
Right.
64
They're required
requires the license to be issued in 90 days, and if it's not issued, then you get it automatically.
it's
That is
issued-
fixed.
but it's issued
All of my
provisionally.
clients are applying on October 1st, and all of my clients are open for retail business for recreational marijuana on January 1st.
If
And that's a
they're
promise.
locally approved.
Every
If
single
they're
one of them.
locally approved.
And if they say no, then bring it on.
I'm not talking about
But it's
licenses
gotta go
being
through the
denied.
state and local approval process.
Because licenses can be approved in 90 days provisionally, and that provision is based off of local approval. I agree totally with Sean.
Yeah.
Local is where the battle's at.
Yeah.
The
And there's-
emergency rules currently say that you can't open your doors for business until you have both approvals. You can
We'll
continue
see.
working toward
We
it,
will
but you don't
see.
get to open your doors for a business until you have both approvals, and you have an
Yeah.
entire year. So you can pay your rent and have your doors closed for an entire year.
Jessica,
We'll
what is
see.
it going to take to transfer these licenses? What is that going to be like?
I think we have a lot of things that are stumbling blocks that we need to be aware of, that you can apply on October 1st, but there may be a whole new set of rules after the election in November because of the fact that the taxes will impact the decision that they make in the licensing process.
And if the taxes go down, there'll be a lot fewer pin-headed bureaucrats poking around in your spot telling you, well, that was a medical plant once and now it's a recreational plant. That's the other thing.
And a
Keep
lot
that in
fewer
mind.
municipalities and cities letting you open up shop at all, Rob.
I disagree with that.
I
You
disagree
really
too.
think that if the tax fails, that Denver's just going to say, oh yeah, come on
Yeah,
in,
they
Boulder,
get
Stop
tax
trying to
revenue.
fear-
Colorado
Fearmonger.
Springs, Aurora,
they
the
get
people who
tax
currently
revenue.
have moratoriums.
They get tax revenue already right
Look, you
now.
have-
from
What about
A
Aurora?
lot of
What
local-
about Colorado Springs?
Aurora's
Yeah.
a done deal. It's not happening
I
either
think the
way.
majority
Yes, it
of
will
local
happen.
governments are weighing heavily on whether the tax measure is going to pass in their decision whether or not to ban.
I think
And-
in reality, whatever local governments allow it, they're going to experience a huge flood of recreational tourism to those towns.
Yes.
Right.
I think they're using the tax like a gun to our heads. You're going to pass this tax if you want your marijuana. If you don't pass the tax, then we're all going to withhold it from you.
Exactly.
How easy is it going to be to find a
I say we
recreational
go back to the
facility?
black market
If
then.
you
Fuck
open up a candy bar and eat it on the premises, while you're walking, I mean, I'm just saying, recreation, it's great in Amsterdam because you could go to all these coffee shops and you could sit there and socialize with like-minded individuals who enjoy the same thing as you. But in this, I mean, it's literally, you still have to go buy it and then you have to
Go-
find somebody to smoke it with if you come on your own, and
The
then,
businesses are going to have to put up signs that
And you
say
can only buy a
recreational
quarter.
and medical, or else you'd never know.
so it's interesting. How many business owners here are going to switch to recreational?
How many are going to go dual licenses?
Both.
Who want to do
Both.
both?
Dual.
Both has to be the option.
But
I
again,
agree.
remember
Again,
that
if the
that
local
is up to
people
the
allow it.
discretion of your local government. Your
Right.
local government can say, you can either be, because there's a couple of choices. You can either be retail only, you could be medical only, you could be dual, only 21 and above, which means that you don't have to build any new inventory because you have to keep separate inventories, or you can be dual and continue to serve patients 18 to 21. But if you do that, that requires you building a separate entrance and exit and all those other things. And any one of these choices, your local government can pick or choose like it's a la carte buffet. So if you want, I would not make an assumption that if your local government has said, we're not going to ban retail, that means they're going to allow you to be medical and retail in the same location. In fact, I know for a fact in Boulder, that is, they don't want to do that. We're going to have to work very hard to even get them to the point of allowing retail and medical in the same spot, which is because their view is, how are we going to regulate this? You got to understand that these people don't do what you do every day. So they are afraid of this because they don't understand it. It's just a natural human response. It doesn't make them bad people, doesn't make them pro-business, it just makes them people.
I don't
If
have
you don't-
kids, but I'm not trying to stop
Look,
people from
but
having
look,
children.
Jessica,
So can I ask just a quick question? How many licenses can each business pool?
so under 1317, there's no limitation on how many particular types of licenses you can hold.
And they'll be how much?
But cities also have the ability to do that. And I think Steamboat's talking about that right now, where to say that you can only have one retail license in the city or one. And I think that's another discussion. So do not sleep on your city councils.
Yeah.
You know, when they say, oh, we're going to implement, read the details. Because the details will impact your business. Like, yeah, it's like, you know, there are going to be some cities where, oh, well, I've got 3 centers in this town. Well, you used to. Because the city will say, no, you can only have one. Because you said regular like alcohol. You got to understand, it's not to say that...
So at any point, they can take their medical facility recreational. They don't have to do it by October. They just, if they wait till January or February and let a few other people do it first, then that just means that they have to pull it later and they have a chance of possibly ending up at the back of the application pile and not being accepted to operate recreational, but they can still operate as a medical facility until they're approved, correct? Or as Rob is saying, within 90 days, unless...
There are some pretty nasty conversion hearings and stuff that's in language, especially in the Denver City Council, with very, very ugly language coming that's going to make us go to hearings in front of the neighborhood
Just like alcohol.
And a lot of
just
local
like alcohol, or
jurisdictions-
maybe worse.
Yeah.
And everybody that supports us is at work. They have this hearing in the middle of the afternoon at 1 o'clock, and they got all the white hairs from the whole neighborhood in there to shut you down.
Stay-at-home moms.
And there's a lot of local governments who are going to want public hearings on renewals and transfers, and I mean, all those processes are going to be different depending on your local government. They can decide whether or not to allow transfers from other jurisdictions. They can decide whether or not they can cap them by number. They can say you can only have 3 in the city, and like Sean said, it's so important to talk to your local officials right now because they can regulate time, place, and manner, and it can affect your whole business.
And Sean raises a very interesting point of you have to speak their language, and they understand the language of re-election. So if you explain to them that very, very calmly, very clearly, are you for or against? You're against, thank you very much for your time, I'll be voting for your opponent and I'll be funding your opponent. If they hear that a couple hundred times, they're going to listen. They want to get reelected. I don't think that they have very strong opinions. I think they take on the opinions of whoever is in their office at that time, whatever the majority vote is, whatever is going to get them back in. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are the majority vote that gets in front of their faces so that they think that we are the public opinion and that we are calling the shots.
So to that point, again, how many people in the room know who your city council member is? Raise your hand. Yeah, see, that's not nearly enough. Tomorrow, not Monday, not next month, tomorrow, find out who your city council member is. Call them. Tell them that you expect them to implement Amendment 64 and you expect them to do it in a timely manner, and you do not expect them to wait around till November to see how an election goes. Tomorrow. Not later, not next week, not next year, tomorrow.
And if you're in Denver, you actually have 3 city council members you have 2 at large and then your own particular one, and they all need to hear from you.
And if I could put a shameless plug in, I am on the board of directors of Colorado Normal, and we just had a meeting and we're discussing about how we can put when these local meetings are occurring on our webpage. So please go to our webpage, look at our events coming up. We're going to try and use that as a resource, because a lot of times you don't know about these meetings because they just fly under the radar until 24, 40 hours before the meeting.
Right.
And I think it would be good for these groups to pull together and somebody be there and be like, we would be more than happy if we have a streaming person there to stream them on Normal's website and try to work together as much as possible. And we already do have all of the dates on the Cannabis Business Association website too, and we will be supporting groups like Normal and stuff as they go out. So definitely let us know how we can all help you. And also, if you have something that you don't agree with in the rules, there's a form here, it's suggested revision to rules and regulations form that you get on the Department of Revenue website. And so this is how you have to communicate with them, I guess.
Just to let you know, the way the process is there will be these 5 working groups that are meeting, and they'll finish up around the middle of August, and then there's a week that's been kind of reserved for any additional meetings in case we need that time, And then the last half of August will be 3 days of public hearings where you can come in and you can comment, but you don't need to wait until then.
It's too
because
late
they
by
are
then.
taking, they are using those forms, and they're taking suggestions. I mean, I've sat through yesterday and today's meetings, and I can say that, that they are very interested in getting feedback from the public, from the industry, because they know that we know better what the needs of the industry are and what works and what doesn't. And you hear really, what seems to us to be really crazy comments and, hi, Panama, really crazy comments and things like that, but a lot of those come out of ignorance because they just don't know our industry. They don't understand that all plants don't grow at the same rate, that certain strains are tall and leggy and other ones are small and bushy, and so we can't say that they're all going to weigh the same or should weigh the same at
They're
8
cannabinoid
weeks.
deficient.
It's just nuts,
It's
but
not their fault.
They just don't know. So
Well,
they
well,
need
listen,
to
it's a-
hear from us.
yeah,
They need to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, and kind of to Rob's point, yeah, I mean, yeah, a lot of them are cannabinoid deficient, but I mean, you got to remember,
Chronically cannabinoid deficient.
Election is a popularity contest. It's not a skill assessment. These people just don't know what you do, and because they don't understand, they're afraid. So what you have to do is reach out to them, talk to them, and make sure they have information so that they're not afraid. But you have to be careful not to blow their mind at one time. I mean, like, if you have a city council member who thinks that you can get high by touching marijuana, which I've had that conversation, you can't, don't pivot to, but don't pivot to like, but it might cure cancer. They're not ready yet.
And you can, as a lawyer, I can advise you, you can legally offer marijuana to your elected official as long as you're not selling it to him. You can give him marijuana for free.
But don't give it to them without telling them
That's
it's
not true. It
all
actually has to be a value of less than $40. Sean, you wrote the
Yeah,
amendment.
last time I checked, a joint is
What
worth
is
less
what
than
is the value that they
$40.
can receive as a gift before they
So
have
real
to
quick, can I
declare?
ask another
I'm just
question
saying.
on these? Let's stick to real quick the compliance of transferring these licenses, because I know a lot of business owners here. Now, employees can work in both areas, or they can only work in a medical, or can your employees
Only
work in both?
currently medically licensed employees would be eligible to work in both areas, but if you got a new badge under recreational only, then you can only work in recreational.
So
Okay.
did you hear that? So, and it's because the background check is deeper for medical than it is for recreational, so they've decided medical.
Here is some really important things to remember, particularly for your friends who didn't qualify for a medical marijuana occupational license. That the retail marijuana license does check for less things, which is a good thing because it's what they check for is irrational. So here are the things that no longer are barriers for employment in the industry. Back taxes, defaulted student loans. God damn it, I wrote this amendment, and I can't remember.
You know, when people like to list their stores, and I have buyers, I like to know how they
so-
filed, because it really, a lot of people didn't know that. You know?
Here's another one. Certain felony convictions are no longer a barrier for employment. So if you have a marijuana-related charge that would not be a felony today, you could now be a badged employee. You still can't be an owner, but there's another legislative session we can try and fix that too, because I think it's absolutely insane that you cannot get a license to own a business for the very thing you went to jail for. That's insanity, and we have to fix it.
And that you could be
It's ridiculous.
Right, yeah, you can be a rapist. That's fine. Come on and get your license. But if you went to jail because you were growing marijuana in your dorm room, you can't own a business. That's insanity. We're going to fix that.
That's exactly the argument I made at the Amendment 64 Task Force,
right.
and it actually did get traction. You saw a physical change in the room, and then the political beast took over, and you just lost it.
Right.
And that two-year residency thing is insane. That's ridiculous. We don't want money coming into our state. I mean, what is that? What other business is told to go away from our state? They've spent money to recruit business here from out of
If you
state.
went to yesterday's meeting where that was
That needs
discussed,
to
they
change.
actually said that if you didn't live, like, let's say you live in a mobile home, but it's not fixed in a park, well, you're not a resident. I don't know what other state you're exporting your residency to because you don't have a nice enough house, but if you live in a teepee or whatever, basically...
Sorry, that's extreme because the rule said such as a condo, an apartment, et cetera. It didn't say only these. And also, from what I understand, is there is someone that is looking up what the actual the statutes in other areas say about what constitutes a resident. So that's a little too far.
With residency, they'll look at like where you pay your taxes and where you intend to live and where your electric bill is, and there's all sorts of
Your
factors
mailing address.
It's going to be a totality of the circumstances.
Your homeless
argument.
shelter.
Yes.
I mean, why
Yeah,
are we
sure.
excluding those people?
But in general, statutes generally tend to look at residency from the lens of intent. So, for example, if you have a house in Colorado, you pay your utility bill in Colorado, but you spend 7 months of the year in Florida, they're probably going to say, we don't think you're a resident. So it's about that intent.
And if you list Florida as
I
your home
disagree.
state on your taxes,
If you have a
Right, for
house
example.
in Colorado, you're a resident. I'm sorry. If
Rob's
you have a
going to
house,
war.
you're a resident.
Well, let's discuss, as we close up here, our implementation for this. We have, of course, the emergency rule regulations come out July 1st, and then October 1st is when local governments must appoint local licensing authorities to accept retail marijuana applications. MMCs and MIPS must be licensed or have an application of good standing as of December 10th, 2012, with all fees paid in order to apply for one of the recreational marijuana RME, which I would assume, is that what that is? Those with the medical marijuana license will have the choice to surrender their MMC license or retain it, depending on whether the local government permits dual premises. Several options exist for converting MMCs or MIPS inventory to retail. November 5th, statewide vote on an excise tax at 15% and a retail, or is now, it's 15, correct, still, okay. And a retail sales tax that can be up to 15%. But we'll start at 10%, with 15% of that 10%, 1.5% shared back to local governments where the business is located. Certain state legislators have threatened to repeal A64 if the tax fails. January 1st, 2014 is the earliest date retail marijuana establishment licenses can be issued for current MMCs. New entrants to the business can submit a notice of intent to apply for a recreational marijuana license. July 1st, new entrants can apply for a recreational marijuana license. New licenses cannot be issued before October 1st. Correct? Okay. September 30th, 2014 required vertical integration and 70/30 ends. So I think we'll have a huge shift in mergers and acquisitions, and probably one of the last shifts in mergers and acquisitions until 2016 at that time. And then we have, that's pretty much it, I guess. So October 1st, 2014, first licenses for new entrants are issued. Independent retail marijuana cultivation facilities can open.
Something that's important to remember too is local governments can choose to keep vertical integration going past October 1st if they want to, and I think a couple of them are already thinking about it. I know Steamboat is, so if you're looking to relocate, it's something you might want to pay close attention to in the regulations is, are they going to require locally that you have to stay vertically integrated, because that changes the whole game.
And that came up in the Springs also, so there's all kinds of that going on with the bringing back what they didn't get at the State House, trying to bring it back and pick it up in the municipalities.
So we've got a lot of good people representing you and representing our industry and our business, and I think we're in a good spot. I mean, I think we have a long ways to go, but I think we're there. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask anybody up here. You're more than welcome to meet with somebody afterwards or come up and ask, or even email us at cloverleafconsulting@gmail.com, and we will keep those in mind for our next panel.
and a quick comment, we won. Prohibition is over. So
The law is on our side.
any way you look at this, we've made history, we've done the right thing, we stuck to our guns. I mean, I'm the young kid on the block. People have been fighting for this their whole lives. I'm only 39. And we can argue over the taxes, we can argue over local jurisdiction, we can argue all of these things, but take pride in what you've done, because you guys have all pushed the ball forward. And on each of these dates, October 1st, January 1st, October 1st next year, we're all pushing the ball forward. And we're going to be able to look back at the strides we've made up to now, and let's just keep pushing it.
And not only that, there will be many states that imitate Colorado. I hope that all of them do. But no matter what We in Washington State are the first.
Yep.
And if you look at the gambling industry, the two leaders in gambling are Las Vegas and Atlantic City. Even though you can gamble anywhere in the country pretty much these days, those two locations are still the leaders because they were first. That's where you go if you really want to get serious. Same thing. Colorado is going to be the cannabis capital of the United States forever because we were the first.
Robert, Corry will be teaching our CLE accredited classes at Clover Leaf University at Well. So if you want to learn from the best, you can definitely sign up for those classes. Do any of you have anything else that you would like to touch on last minute?
Are you taking questions? Because there's some hands going up.
Yeah, actually, I have a cute thing to talk about real quick. I just want to say that the Industrial Hemp Committee started work today, and I sat in on it, and it was actually, as Teri would like to say, it was one of those awe-inspiring moments where people were taking hemp seriously as a crop. You know, there was any kind of attempt by the AG's representative to do any kind of fear-mongering about marijuana if the THC level goes over 3% was immediately poo-pooed by the entire people, and I just loved it, and it was great. And to see people treating this as like a serious industry without your prohibitionists and your special interests and all that stuff getting in the way was, I think it was really inspiring. So at least there's something, a little bright light in all this, so.
A lot of bright lights.
A lot of bright lights.
Get some sunglasses.
Lots of glowing embers.
I would like to say we had our first growers meeting last week, and it went wonderful, and a lot of people came out and for the first time, and we're going to see a day when we can put those organizers in, or put those growers into regulated and make them independent contractors and let them go to work like they should. And we want to try to go for the pardon for anybody that's been convicted of marijuana-related felonies. I think next year is the year we start pushing the governor for those pardons.
And if you want to know how you can be associated with the union and get that support in your area too, you could talk to TJ as well.
So questions, looks like. Question?
Tim, go ahead.
All right, my question is, there's numbers, this is tax related, but there's numbers that came out before from CSU that had absolutely nothing to do with any number. The numbers representative.
Don't go crazy.
All right, so there was a CSU tax study that came out, and it failed. The income study had no representation for anything that this community has done. And in fact, the numbers that have come out here recently say $2 billion the first year in sales. Hundreds of millions in dollars of that is going to be sales tax and go back into wherever it needs to go, probably in general fund. The problem is not overtaxing us. The money's there. The problem is getting your legislators to put that money where it belongs, to guide it where it belongs, not just turn us upside down.
That's exactly right.
What's your question,
Seriously, the money is there.
No, so-
the problem is getting with your legislators to put that money in the right place. I am not going to deal with a 40% sales tax and the
if you
people
look
of
at any
Colorado
of
are not.
the audits
I'll
that
answer the question now because actually, I think yesterday, the day before, the writers of that study actually admitted their numbers were wrong, and the reason why the numbers were wrong is because they wrote the study before the final bill passed. So they were using the recommendations from the task force, which was littered with all sorts of pet projects and things that were unnecessary and blah, blah, blah. Because of some of the people that are sitting out here on the stage, actually, a lot of the things they were factoring in didn't happen. We would convince the legislature, hey, you know what? You don't need to have brand new treatment programs. You don't need to have 5 million new treatment programs, blah, 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 blah. So what ended up happening is that the people who did that study actually themselves admitted their numbers were wrong, their estimates were completely out of line, and that there's going to be significantly more revenue because those projects they were expecting to have in the bill, which made no sense, were taken out.
And it's a valid point because here's the government's logic behind these taxes, all right? We failed as the government. The government says, we failed you. We've had 3 scathing audits, Department of Revenue, MMED, Health Department, Medical Marijuana Registry, and now Denver Excise and Licensing. All 3 of them failed miserably in every single task we asked them to do. Give us more money.
Yeah.
What job works that way? What one of us can go to one of our bosses and say, boss, I failed, double my pay? I mean, it just, the world that these
Only
government people live in, is insane. They're insane. We have to deny them more money. Don't give them more money to fail even more. It makes no sense to me.
Beyond what Rob said, I think that there's the fact that a lot of these regulators, I mean, the municipalities and the regulators on a state level are just greedy for more toys. They don't even intend to use them for what they're saying they're using them for. Denver wants those 6 vans to pick up drunks. They don't want them for marijuana, but they can't say what they want them for. They just will get them, and then when they're not using them for what they said they wanted them for, they'll use them for what they want them for. They're looking at us to pay for things. And reality is, if we're 100,000 patients, we're maybe 500,000 users total, if we factor that there's 4 recreational users for every person who got their card, which seems realistic. You can't expect 500,000 people to pay for everything that every municipality in the state wants.
And just to put some numbers on that, the last I saw, the tax revenues from medical marijuana were $200 million. So if we're talking times 4 or times 5, that's I went to law school. So what's the math on that?
How much music school? I don't know.
You know,
Lots of money.
500 million, a billion.
Yeah.
It's a straight money.
First off, thank you very much for coming and talking to us. My question is for recreational businesses, how is the plant count going to work?
There won't be
They
one.
haven't talked about it yet even.
No limit.
The legislature created kind of a catch-all for the Department of Revenue to establish how plant counts are going to be. And they say, for example, you may use one of these types. And what they were talking about was square footage, per light, canopy, or other.
Any other reasonable metric.
So it kind of pushes the ball over. And I got to say, a little bit to the MED's credit, they've had 3 years of hard education on how this business works. And the conversations I've had with Barbara Broll and Cam Rizal and all of them, they get it. They understand it. And I feel like they're going to do the right thing. The question is, it's always going to come back to local because local is uneducated. So you got to educate your local politicians on. They might say, well, I think Teri was telling me that some were talking about weighing the plant at various stages.
That was today's meeting, yeah.
And it just shows that they don't have any understanding of how plants work, much less these plants.
Well, look, I mean, to give you an example of how completely uninformed local officials tend to be, I do a lot of City of Boulder lobbying. They threw this ordinance out, but they actually came with an ordinance back in February. Now, this is talking about a city that's got, 67 or more licensees for between cultivation facilities and dispensaries. And so you would think, be familiar with the current state law with the 3 classes of licenses and how many plants you can have, blah, blah, blah. So they came up with a proposal that cultivation facilities for retail marijuana should have no more than 500 plants. Now, there isn't a cultivation facility in the city right now that has that many. Everyone's got way more than that. So that's how uninformed these people are. So watch the city council members. Watch them. They don't know what they're talking about.
And kind of what happened this last legislative session is that there were a lot of topics like defining what does it mean to consume openly and publicly, and the legislature could not come up with a definition that everybody could agree on that also would work everywhere in the state as a statewide concern. The same thing with locked and enclosed for cultivation, for home growing, is what does that mean? So what they ended up doing is leaving a lot of those decisions up to local authority. Now, it's kind of funny because local authority always, the cities and stuff always, say they want a lot of control, and yet they complain when the state doesn't make the decisions that they want to, and then they actually have to do the work and do it themselves. So, but the reason that we keep talking about you have to go to local, you have to talk to your city, you have to talk to your county is because we're all running there's a whole bunch of us here that have been to multiple places across the state. And it's because the legislature took a lot of these key pieces and put them into local authority. Can you have a dual license, or do you have to be medical or recreational? And you can't be both. That's left up to local. local. Can you have if you are dual, can you have a virtual separation, or do you have to have a hard separation? That again is left up to local authorities. So, and then there's the taxes and all these other things. So you have to pay attention to what's going on in your own community. And honestly, all politics are local. When you hear that, it sounds kind of trite, but it's true.
When Coors has a keg limit, then we should tolerate as an industry a plant count limit. But until that happens, the intent of 64 is this is legalized, and you should grow whatever demand you need to meet from your customer base, and you know your customers better than anyone else. That's the intent of 64. So there's no more patients tied to recreational, therefore there can't be a plant count limit.
So everyone go to these meetings and advocate for that.
And they are looking at a tiered system, though, for license fees
could put a cap on production.
based on size.
I guess DOR could even.
That's a job-killing move.
I know.
I think I have an important question because I'm a patient and I feel like the best thing I can do medically for myself is to recreate. When I'm having a good time, I have no stress. I just want to know, hey man, cool, you come out of town, people are going to be coming from Amsterdam now to enjoy Denver, Colorado. And maybe they should pay the high tax, that's cool with me. But if I'm a patient, which I am, I'm a patient, maybe I can't afford the tax. And the way I see a lot of the Medicaid and Medicare programs work is that we need some kind of assistance to get all of our other prescription drugs. And I'm just wondering, and I don't know if I wasn't paying attention enough, but probably as a patient, I shouldn't have to pay the tax that the recreational
state tax
retail business is, even though I do agree that when I'm stress-free, I'm having a good time.
And local governments, again, will have that decision.
When I show my card, can that be the card?
Well, currently there's no
No
state medical
It depends
tax,
on
but there-
where you are. It's, like TJ said, the local jurisdictions.
Colorado because I need my medicine.
Right.
Now,
So some
Right
local.
now, there's no tax on it.
Yeah.
Now the medical will still exist, so we have Amendment 20, it's in our Constitution. We will, let me finish. In
No tax.
medical, the Amendment 64 specifically says that the excise tax, that none of this, on the state level, none of that applies to medical.
Right.
Now the
cities are
issue
looking
is,
at-
the issue is that there are local cities and counties that are considering a tax and applying that to medical. And there are actually a handful of towns in Colorado that actually already have a tax on medical. But to get that break, you will have to shop in a medical marijuana dispensary, just like you do now, unless there are some dispensaries I've talked to that are converting over to recreational that are planning on offering specific discounts to patients. But that is a business decision left up to them, and I would be very surprised if the state mandated at any level that they did something like that on the recreational, because the systems are supposed to be kept separate.
And the end game, and I don't know when we're going to get there, but the end game is you walk into one place that has everything you could want, a virtual marijuana, wonderland, and when you go to buy, you show your medical card that gets you out of the taxes, or you show your driver's license that gets you with the taxes, but it's all seamless. That's the end game.
But we're not there yet.
May I make a statement? Actually, in reality, you can't just shop. Like, hypothetically, under this new system in a dual licensed location, physical location, if you go in with your red card and you want to buy a product that's on the recreational side of the business, you have to pay those taxes despite being a patient, because the excise tax was applied during the point of sale and it doesn't go away just because you have your red card. Now, this becomes a real problem for owners of businesses because let's say hypothetically you have 50 products that you stock, but you had a run on raspberry. So somebody comes in and they're a patient. They want raspberry, but you only have it. Now you're asking that person to pay that 40% tax.
Or you give them a discount because they're a patient.
Or you just say, hey, everyone in this industry really should not support this tax because it's one more layer of difficulty for regulators.
I need raspberry.
Yeah. You do.
I want to say something here. that, you know, every patient in this state, depending on their income level, is due no taxes. All you have to do is file a state zero tax, whatever, I mean, if you're on AOD as a veteran or whatever, you just, you file for zero taxes and you pay no taxes.
And it's the same form where you can get your red card for free also.
That's
same
right.
qualification process. So
Thanks,
currently,
Rob.
patients are taxed at a regular tax rate. You can be exempt from that as a patient if you qualify, and
You
you can
have
get
to
a free
show,
red card.
You have to
indigent
qualify.
status to
Yeah.
qualify for that.
There you go.
You
I
have to
feel
qualify,
like
though.
the taxation right now is a little bit of a filibuster topic, and it is in the dispensary also. I bud tend, and most of my patients are confused. They want to support and they want to vote. Is there anything that's proposed right now that I can share with them that would benefit and maybe create a tax ceiling for the patient side of things? Are they even throwing that on the table?
Different cities are.
So, are there any like lobbyists to follow, any actual trails that people can see, all of you guys, and you're found here? Is there anything that we need to be aware of that maybe we need to kick out, that we need to vote against inside or request to be
Sensible
amended?
Colorado, and Sean can speak to this, has a pretty good, I think, get out the GOTV kind of movement, but they're very good about action alerts, especially when it comes to local governments. They did a really good groundswell when it came to the Boulder tax. I know UFCW has a really good grassroots movement too, like they have a lot of memberships. But
So
I would
does the
say
Cannabis
drug
Patients
policy,
Action
I'm sure-
Network here.
Yeah,
For
I'm sure
sensible-
drug policy has a really good one
Yeah.
too.
But
For Sensible Colorado, you can check out our, we have a local action center on sensiblecolorado.org, and you can contact cities that way, and then if you get on our email list, we'll send you an alert when anything's going on in any local jurisdiction.
I think the most important thing for bud tenders to do right now is to tell patients to renew their patient cards.
Keep your red card. Keep your red card.
That is the absolute, you must do that, because it's a small investment if everything goes right, and it'll be your only way to access your medicine if anything goes wrong. And there's no guarantee everything's going to go right. There's plenty of pitfalls ahead. If you're a bud tender, if you're a marijuana business owner, if you're a patient yourself and you talk to anybody that's a medical marijuana patient, tell them renew your patient registry.
Absolutely.
If you, my registry expires on January of next year, so I'm fine. No, renew your registry. Is that clear? Renew.
Yes.
It's nothing more
Thank you.
important.
It's
And
absolutely
everybody's
true.
just assuming that recreational's coming, I don't need to renew my red card, the patient count's dropping, and everybody's plant counts are dropping, and we got a real problem come October.
And you get double constitutional protection with a red card, so
Yeah.
you're...
And also right now, depending on, some law enforcement is actually indicating that you can have 6 plants for recreational and 6 plants for medical because they are separate. So I can't tell you for sure to do that. That is not my advice. I am not a lawyer, but that is what we've heard from some.
I agree. You get 6 for recreational and 6 for medical.
And
I
that
would
you can
certainly argue
have, your 1 ounce recreational weed and your 2 ounces or whatever that you're allowed for medical. So keep your red
That's why I
card.
have 12.
I would ask, as the bud tender, I would ask your patients, do you want to pay 40% more for your marijuana? If so, vote yes on these taxes. If not, vote no.
They made a big
keep
mistake
your
by
red
tying
card.
those two together. If they had separated it, it might have gone somewhere. But understand that there's still a very, very large percentage of Colorado that is not for marijuana. So that's what, 46%?
Majority rules.
Right.
But how much of that
they
majority voted
they
for it
only
because
need
of
to
that?
get 4% on their side. So it's a very, I'm not advocating for one or the other. I'm still thinking about it. And I love the debate I heard here tonight because I thought it was very informative. But if you are going to be against it, you need to be super, super, super loud because all they have to do is get 4% of the remaining voters over to their side.
But we get the votes of the people who hate taxes. All those conservative, right-wing Republicans.
I know
Not all
people.
of them. They're
I know
fine
people.
taxing stoners. stoners. They're fine taxing stoners.
I know
That's
a
why
lot
it
of
passed
people
in
who don't-
Colorado Springs.
But the
We get a
taxes
lot of
are
people.
taxes, but
the
it passed
taxes
in
are
Colorado
also
Springs.
the vehicle for a lot of local jurisdictions to move forward to ensure the big picture moves forward. The taxes are important.
Can I interject something
which
here?
is why, well, just real quick, I want to speak directly to Sean's point, which is also why, I mean, I don't know how this tax measure is going to go, to be honest, because, I mean, to Sean's point, and maybe somewhat to Craig's point, is that if you are opposed to marijuana and you voted no on Amendment 64, you might think, well, if I vote no on these taxes, then I can create new municipalities banning. So people say, I don't know why people voted for Amendment 64. Frankly, I don't know why people are going to vote one way or the other on the tax. So I don't know how that's going to.
When I'm out on the campaign trail this fall telling people to vote no, I'm going to say, do you want a bigger government or a smaller government? You want a bigger government than tax marijuana? I think that'll work. I think we get a lot more votes against these taxes, maybe people who didn't vote for marijuana.
I'd really
But we
like to
shall
throw
see.
something out here from a business perspective. It's not just these taxes that we're going to be passing on to the consumer. There's also the packaging, the labeling, and all of the other
testing,
onerous bullshit that we're going to be asked to fucking meet. So you sit here and you talk about this 40%. You're also talking about 40% on top of this extra $7 for the safety fucking package and all this other bullshit. So
40% isn't the right number.
they're not just taxing the cannabis, they're taxing everything you buy in there. So they're taxing you on that extra packaging. They're taxing you on all of the fucking bullshit and onerous hoops.
Well, more, I think.
It's 25%.
And you also have to realize that if
25%.
I might, more importantly in terms of that, from the business perspective, of course, is 280E. Now, fortunately, the General Assembly did say that they're not going to continue to tax at 280E levels for the state purposes of state taxes. That passed the General Assembly this session for both medical marijuana business and for retail marijuana business. But the thing is, it's still the IRS. So if you're a business owner, one of the things you're going to be factoring in is that, look, I can't deduct my rent. I can't deduct my employees' salaries, blah, 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 and on it goes. So I think that is probably the most important factor. So that's why, now that we got it fixed on the state level, everybody needs to be talking to a member of Congress and say, look, you need to sign on to Representative Perlmutter's bill.
That's our representative Perlmutter here in Colorado.
You need to, I mean, sorry, that's actually that's Ed Blumenauer's bill, the 280E tax bill. But his Perlmutter's bill is the banking bill. But either way, but again, tomorrow, right after you're done calling your city council member, introducing yourself, call your member of Congress. Before you do that, go to thomas.gov, type in the word marijuana as a keyword. It'll show you all the bills related to marijuana, and make sure your member of Congress is signed on to all of them. And if not, find out why.
Exactly.
And those
Sean Coleman,
that are
ladies and
signed
gentlemen.
on, support them. Tell them you'll vote for them. Send them money.
Yep. We also will be helping with fundraisers and
also
stuff with these
volunteer
local
time if
communities.
you don't
So
wanna
if
give
you
your
need
money to
that,
a
let
dirty
us know.
politician.
Or
They're all kinda
donate
dirty.
to the Cannabis Patients Action Network, because we are supporting these candidates.
Yep.
But then she's just going to give your money to a politician.
Okay, so, here's the thing. Look, I mean,
be the
all,
right
all joking aside, I mean, when I first went to D.C. to work on Capitol Hill, I was as bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as anybody could be, and I came away just as disillusioned as anybody else can be. But the reality is the game. But the reality is the game is the game, right? So you can say politicians are bad people. You're probably right. You can say politicians are assholes. That's probably true. That a lot of them are retarded, and a lot of them are are pedophiles. Probably doesn't matter. What matters is the game is the game. They hold the cards, and you need to play the game by their rules if you plan on winning. Period. That's it. So if there's a politician that's doing the right thing, you may hate giving campaign contributions, but you know what? If you give that person $10, you are now on their mailing list. You are now on their radar. They care about what you say. It is absolutely 100%, make no mistake about it, pay to play. And if you want to play, you have to pay, and that's all it is. I wish it wasn't that way.
You don't have to give them money.
Yeah,
I
you
got
get
$30 worth of mail for
From
$10.
all the way down to your local level.
Yeah, but you do. I mean, the reality is, look, it's all fine and good to not deal in reality. I don't want to do it either. But that's not real. It's not going to work. What works is if there's a politician that, first of all, you have to know everybody that represents you. You need to know who they are. You need to know their name. You need to know everybody in their staff. Tomorrow, not next week, tomorrow. And if they are doing the right thing, you make sure that they know that you know. So you are calling them, you're sending them emails, you are thanking them for every vote they cast that's the right vote, you send them an email and thank them the next day. You send them checks. Doesn't have to be big, $5, $10, because you know why? Because now you're in the database. Now they know that you exist. Because if you're no, they don't.
Yes,
no,
they do.
Okay, so
if you send enough emails, they know who you are.
Yeah, no, that's not true.
That's not true.
You know
either.
what? When I
make
go to the
sure that you
Capitol,
put in your email that you are a constituent, you are a voter, you live in their district, because
then
they'll
tell
pay
me
more
how
attention.
I get 20 or 30 people from the Capitol's email every.
I like to hand deliver my letters.
Jessica, nobody can ignore your emails, so
right,
you
but also, let me give you a little reality check, Jessica. If, like, for example, if you send an email this is from inside congressional office. I know this because it used to be my job.
Yeah.
When you send an email to a member of Congress, it goes to an email address that absolutely nobody checks. That's the truth. That's the truth. That is the truth.
How I'm
That's how it
getting
works.
responses from them.
So we are going to have to wrap up because we are.
But I do want to.
To be
finish the point.
continued.
So, but before I was interrupted, because it's incredibly important. If a politician is doing the right thing on your issue, you must support them, and you have to make sure that they know you're supporting them.
Yes.
And then if they're doing the wrong thing, you have to make sure that they know you're supporting their opponent. Right?
Yes.
So when you call your member of Congress, there's like, well, you're going to probably talk to the staff. It's like, well, we're not going to support Ed Palmer's bill. Okay. Well, then I'm sending a campaign check to your opponent right now. When you send them a campaign, send their opponent a campaign check, send an envelope to their campaign office so they know that you just sent with a copy of the check, so they know that you contributed to their opponent because they didn't
Their
support
opponent may also be a prohibitionist. That's not a good strategy.
It doesn't matter. Then you send it to their primary opponent because their primary opponent is definitely
I
going to
agree.
be
The
a little bit more
primary is a
progressive
more
than they're going to be or conservative.
But you have some people in conservative districts who know that their opponent agrees with them, and there's no reason to listen to us. And so it's stupid to try to play a money game to send $5 to two people who are both going to fuck you in the ass.
Yeah. Okay.
The point is about who gets elected.
The point is about exactly right. It's
Right.
about
That's
who gets
why we
elected.
need better primary candidates and better
So,
primary participation.
bottom line is people want to get reelected. So if your city officials want to be reelected, then they need to then we need to put the pressure on them. Even if we just get 5 people from your dispensary or a group of people to sit together in those meetings, it's still pressure, it's still making a voice, and we have to have a voice within each local municipality. It's super important right now as we're creating these new rules, and that's the bottom line, is we have to have a voice. So, if you can't make those meetings, letters, things like that, but if you don't have time, you can always hire a lobbyist. I mean, these people have been going all day, and look at them, still going. Like, these are the best people to fight for you at the bottom line. We've got the union. We've got a lot of different people here to support these businesses. So definitely find the best support system for you. And if you have any questions, you can definitely always go to our website on the Cannabis Business Association. We'll have all of that available for you as well. And all of the updates are on there, too, and all the forms for free.
And if you're in Denver, talk to Robin Kanish and Chris Herndon. They're swing votes.
And while you're there, try to convince them to do clubs, too, okay?
No doubt.
And we will see you next week. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Chloe.